From Boss Track, it's Her Hype Squad, a show about amazing women who've made incredible strides as leaders in their industry. They're here to support you in your leadership growth, to encourage you and hype you up as part of your Hype Squad. Hello everyone, it's Michelle Harris back with another episode of Her Hype Squad. This week I'm talking with Meredith Chandler, a powerhouse sales executive and strategist. In our conversation, we are unpacking everything from the secret sauce of building killer organization systems to the art of humility in leadership. Meredith also shares her pro tips on prepping for those crucial one-on-ones, the magic behind professionally designed vision boards that actually work, and how she gets fired up with David Goggins motivation. But before we jump in, let me give you a sneak peek into Meredith's world. Meredith Chandler has a decade of experience building, scaling, and leading successful sales teams. She is currently head of new business at Unicrn, a fractional sales consultancy, and also consults on her own at merediththesalescoach.com. She splits her time between San Francisco and Salt Lake City. You could catch her in a swanky San Francisco restaurant or on the ski slopes in Salt Lake City if you want to talk sales. If you enjoy my conversation with Meredith, be sure to subscribe to our channel and help more people find us by sharing this episode with others or by leaving a review. Or subscribe to our weekly newsletter filled with things we found that we're excited about and we're inspired by, along with valuable leadership advice to watch, listen to, or read. It's a little bit of joy for your inbox each Monday. You can subscribe at www.thebosstrack.com/weeklyjoy. All right, so let's get into it. Here's my conversation with the incredible Meredith Chandler. Hi, Meredith. Thank you so much for joining us on Her Hype Squad. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today.
Hi, Michelle. Equally excited. Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. Thank you for taking the time out to spend with us. Well, as always, I like to share, or I like to give my guests an opportunity to share a little bit about themselves and what they do and any kind of leadership backgrounds they can hear from your perspective.
Yes, I am currently a head of sales. I have been in sales leadership for maybe 5 or 6 years now. I also have merediththesalescoach.com, where I do consulting for GTM teams and also individuals as they look for their next gig, help them interview, prep, negotiate, but also help you either as an AE or manager as your in-seat deal strategy, pipeline review, etc. But got my start in tech sales at a little company called Yelp. Maybe some of your listeners have heard of it. And from there, got into more of the startup world. So was one of the first reps at Samsara, helped grow them as they went public, then moved over to a company called Spiff, which has been acquired by Salesforce, Captivate IQ, P Club. So a lot of startups. That's my specialty, I'd say.
Yeah, I love it. And one of the things, of course, we want to talk about is leadership, and you have such great leadership experience. I'm curious, like with all of the years that you've had in, what do you think are the most important qualities for a leader?
Yes, I'd say first and foremost, humility. It's not about you anymore, which can be really tough to give up. So I've gone from IC to manager at a few different companies, and I see this all the time. But unfortunately, managers and first-time managers don't get a ton of training on the new skill set that is needed to go from IC to manager. They just say, "You're doing such a great job selling. Teach everybody how to do what you do." And it's actually a very different set of skills to teach and to lead versus just selling. So I'd say humility is big. You're not in the spotlight anymore. I've seen that be very difficult for sellers to give up, understandably. And then I think organization, you really have to be hyper organized. You are not only in charge of your direct reports, which can be anywhere from 8 to 10 at any given time, but you are now doing cross-functional meetings, and you have a lot of responsibilities with other departments. You're hiring, you're ensuring that your team hits numbers and KPIs. There's so much to keep track of. I recommend that everyone get super organized at the beginning, building your systems, because it's going to save you a lot of time throughout your career. So organize your Gmail folders, your Gong trackers, bookmark all of your folders, your dashboard, your bookmark bar, do your reports at the very beginning in your CRM, and make sure that everything is just hyper organized. Because if you can do this big lift at the beginning, it's going to make your life much easier.
I'd love to talk a little bit about humility. I know that was one of the first things that you mentioned. And how did you learn, like, what was your experience that leads you to kind of highlight that as one of the biggest leadership skills? Do you have any stories you could share about your transition and how you figured out that humility was an important skill or trait?
Yes, I have one, we'll call it a whoopsie moment. I was leading this team, and I think we were 2 to 3 months in, but we were already well ahead of quota, and we were at maybe 150, 160%, which was amazing. And I should have been satisfied with that, but I was helping one rep on the team close a deal. And I don't remember what I said, Michelle, but he had done a great job bringing this in. And I think I said some sort of comment like, well, we're still leaving too much on the table. And he snapped at me, understandably. He was like, the discount is only 12%. Like, what more do you want? And at that moment, I realized, like, this is actually a great deal. This rep is going above and beyond. I should be really satisfied with that. And so, not projecting maybe unrealistic expectations that I had of myself onto others. That was a big whoopsie moment for me.
Yeah. What would you say is a good way for somebody to practice or learn humility? I don't even know if that's possible or if it's something you just have to face through experience.
I think a little bit of both. So, going through it firsthand in a professional environment, if you can. I also think if there's sort of group activity or organization you can do on the side to prepare you for that, athletics is a great teacher for that, especially if you're able to join a group sport. If you think of something like soccer, or I play field hockey, when somebody scores, it's because the team helped them get there. And if you're dribbling down the field and you try to shoot, you're going to pass to whoever's open, right? With the highest probability of scoring. You're not going to take on 3 or 4 defenders yourself for the glory, which is what an IC does versus a leader. So if there's some sort of group sport or maybe a group activity, some sort of acting, theater, where you have to rely on other people again to work towards a cohesive goal.
That's great advice. And do you have any experience in either of those? I understand you might be in a group sport.
Yes, I do play competitive field hockey.
Yeah, I really do love that because I think we talked in a previous conversation about I used to play field hockey in school and I didn't realize that it was even something that you could get involved with as like in an adult competitive sport. It's so interesting to me.
That's right. We'll have to get you out on the pitch with us.
Yeah. Now, do you know, since you're in that world, is that something people should be able to find like across the country, or is it kind of where you're at? It's a little.
It's more popular than you would think, actually. So there's a lot of social pickups I've found all over the world. There's also all sorts of leagues, and depending on the level of commitment you're willing to put into it too, there's competitive, there's social, there's something for everyone. I do a little bit of both. In our social leagues, we have first timers all the time, so
Yeah,
something for everyone.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm thinking back to your experience too about your communication and how you got that feedback from, well, maybe not a positive way of getting feedback from the person on your team. Is there something you would recommend, something you learned from that, a way that you get feedback from your team on how they're feeling about things, like what how they're doing on things, like with general feeling. I know it's hard sometimes for people to want to contribute that without getting the direct ask. I'm curious, like how you've done that in your career.
Yes, some forums that I've used that have been successful are anonymous Google Docs. Now, this works well when you have a larger team of 5 plus. If you have three, they're still going to be nervous because they know that their answers you're going to be able to decipher who is who.
Yeah.
So, anonymous Google Docs, I like the exercise of start, stop, continue. So, what's something that we're doing today that you want us to keep doing? What's something we're doing today that doesn't serve you that you wish we would stop, and what's something we're not doing today that could be beneficial to you or the team. That's been largely helpful. Using your one-on-ones for feedback as well. One-on-ones should not be pipeline reviews. I see this all the time. There should be a separate meeting for pipeline reviews. One-on-one should be about goals, careers, strategy, feedback. And then there are tools in the market, right? You have Lattice and you have others that can really form structured anonymous feedback better than any of these.
What is Lattice? I've never heard of that.
Lattice is an, I want to say HR tool, but essentially they help you structure your one-on-ones. You can send out anonymous surveys through the team or the org. You can complete your performance reviews in there. It just kind of documents everything. And then you can do quick little, they call them pulse surveys. So every week they can send one question to the entire company, such as, did you find your work fulfilling this week? Yes or no?
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I hadn't heard of that. And you mentioned I'd like to kind of dig into one-on-ones a little bit because one of the questions I do get is, okay, I know I need to have one-on-ones because that's what people tell me as a new leader or as a leader. This is what I'm supposed to do to stay in touch with my team. But then they get into the conversations and they're like, well, I don't know exactly what to talk about. Do you have a certain structure that you use going into your one-on-ones that might help listeners?
Yes, I do. So I keep a running doc so that throughout the week, I and the direct report can both be filling in discussion topics. And so we're not scrambling 5 minutes before the one on one on what to talk about. So start there, have a running doc. Anytime something comes up, put it in the doc and then, put it away. That's part of your organization.
Mm.
And then from there, I like to start at the top of the doc. I have their quota for the quarter, the month, or whatever you're working on. And then week over week, we track their progress. And then along with the quota are their goals, right? So maybe their goals relative to their quota is I want to hire ACV. I want to work on my negotiation skills so that I leave less on the table, or I need to improve my outbound conversion rates. And so we work on 2 to 3 goals week over week and we track them week over week. And okay, what are you doing to achieve this? How can I help support you? How did this week go? What are you thinking in terms of your goal for next week, etc.? So that's the bulk of the conversation. Then you have little housekeeping items, but it's rarely pipeline review unless there's a pressing deal and the reps want to use that time to have some strategy.
Right. I love that idea of keeping a running list because I know, personally from me, you think of an idea or something you want to talk to somebody about. And if you don't talk to somebody about it right away, you could easily let that slip out of your mind. So getting into the habit of keeping that list of things that you want to bring up or talk about, even if it's something that you see them in an hour and you have that conversation, in case you don't, you have that on the list. And just because you forget about it doesn't mean it's not still relevant. And, you don't want to lose that. So I love that approach of doing that. And yeah, it definitely helps with the white space when you go into a meeting too, because you're like, okay, well, can't think of anything at the moment, but at the same time, the whole past week, like you've had things that you wanted to talk to them about.
Absolutely. For me, There's nothing more annoying than reporting into somebody that never has anything on our 101 agenda, because it gives the impression, whether or not this is true, whether or right this is right or wrong, but it gives the impression of you are not proactively thinking about my career or how you can support me in my day-to-day. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, this is very common for managers, for directors, for, VPs and above. Everybody has a million things going on at once, but we're asking a lot from salespeople, right? And they only get one 30-minute meeting with you per week. Some of you only do it every other week, like shame on you. But they only get one 30-minute meeting. So why not show them I'm thinking about you throughout the week and how I can help you and how I can help you get better? Because when you get on, and I've had this happen to me countless times, I've had directors and such say, okay, what do you want to talk about? Mm-hmm. And first it's like, well, if you opened up the doc, you would see I put the agenda in there. But now that I'm in the doc, I see you have put no agenda in there yet again. Yeah. So it's just not a good feeling. And we want our direct reports to feel good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. And I like the idea of including development in the weekly meetings. And even if it's something that's longer term, there's not a lot of progress. It kind of keeps it top of mind. I'm curious if you have a specific example of somebody who wanted to develop a certain skill. How did you approach it? And were there certain, did you look outside the organization? Was it training or conferences, or where do you look to development opportunities?
So one example that comes to mind is a previous team of mine. We did QBRs every quarter. I highly recommend QBRs because it'll tell you at the top of the quarter if you are set up to hit your number by the end, and you can get way ahead of things if there's a gap versus being surprised on the last week of the quarter. Mm-hmm. So we were doing the QBRs, presenting, and I had one rep who shared his numbers. However, he was baking in the numbers from the team averages. The team average close rate at the time was about 22%, but this individual's close rate was 11%. Mm-hmm. And so I had to correct him and say, these numbers look good because you're using the team average, but your close rate is half of that. So we are going to have to either double your activities or improve your close ratio or increase your ACV. And so with those three things, we took it, kind of line by line, because at that point, he kind of needed all three of them, right? So, okay, how can we increase your ACV? And he came up with, well, I should start pitching the other products more often. Great. There's your first goal. Pitch other products on 90% of your calls. And the other one was, what did I say? Increase ACV. Oh, improve win rate. So if his win rate was 11%, we needed to, I think we said 16% when we did the numbers. Okay, how are we going to improve your win rate? Well, I'm going to get deeper into pain on discovery calls. Okay, what does that mean? And then he put together a list of questions that he thought he could ask every call that would get him closer to pain. Things like multi-threading instead of single threading. So again, it goes back to your one-on-one doc. Those were his goals. And so every week we would measure his performance against those goals. Okay, rep, you said you're going to pitch products, multi-products on 90% of the calls. You had 5 calls this week. Did you pitch it on 4.5 of them? Yes, I did. Okay, great. And so with that detailed plan and accountability week over week, things like him self-assessing his call recordings and then tagging me after, we were able to get him to his goal. So a lot of times it can be done just within the team if you are very clear on the gaps and how you're going to bridge those gaps. But it's also great to incorporate other, podcasts, other books, outside training. Totally depends on the goal.
Yeah, that's so true. And when you say multi-threading versus single threading, what exactly do those terms mean?
Yes, so single threaded means selling to one individual, and multi-threading means selling to multiple individuals. Gong released a study saying that if you're multi-threaded, your win rate will go up by 30%, especially in today's market, Michelle. You can imagine with all the layoffs and all the uncertainty, if you're in a cycle with one person and the next day their email is deactivated, your deal's dead in the water. But if you have 2 or 3 other people that can pick up where you left off, you're far more likely to make it across the finish line.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I'm not deep in the sales world, although I know I should be from a lot of different respects. But thank you for providing that clarity. And so, speaking of sales, I know sales can be very stressful, a stressful job, and being responsible for meeting quotas and really being the heart of a company. Because if you don't have the revenue, you don't have a thriving business. So I'm curious, are there things that you do personally that kind of keep you sane and keep you on top of your game to be able to be the best leader for your team?
Yeah, there's a few different things I do. The first nerd alert, I guess, would be going back to organization. So just being hyper organized all the time in your professional life, but also your personal life. Maybe you don't have to be hyper organized for your personal life, but again, things like Gmail folders and bookmarks and just knowing where things are throughout the house and putting things back right away so that if you're going from work to your field hockey match or your, theater production or what have you, your mind's not thinking, okay, where is this? Where is that? Kind of decreases your stress already, just knowing where everything is. You read an email, you put it in the folder. If you need to come back to it, you know exactly where it is. I think that's really important and sometimes overlooked because we're so organized at work. People don't often want to organize their life too. And I know it's not for everyone, but it works well for me. I also am a huge proponent of activities outside of work. I'm shocked with the amount of conversations I've had over the years of people who go from a screen all day to a TV screen in the evening with little in between. And so again, if you can sign up, even better, for a team or an organization that's going to plan everything for you and all you have to do is show up, right? So again, if we're in athletics, sign up for a team sport, or maybe you have matches or competitions on Tuesday. Tuesday, you have to shut off at 5:30 to make it to your match or whatnot so that your team isn't let down. Or again, if you're in a theater group or an improv group or an art, maybe not an art class, because I don't know if that's group, but something where other people rely on you, that's a great accountability system. Some other really weird things I do is, I like to start the day with a walk. It helps, the fresh air getting through your lungs and your body really helps oxygenate your entire self. And with that, I listen to some pump up podcasts, which again, probably not for everyone, but I like those military style yelling, what is it, David Goggins, or he's like, are you going to get the day or is the day going to get you? And I'm on my walk. I'm like, I'm going to get the day.
I love it.
So that's been largely helpful. And then also spending about 25 minutes a day on LinkedIn has been really helpful. So it helps me keep current with the market and trends, connect with other leaders, and that way you can keep a pulse on what's working, what's not working, and you can share it with your team. You can share it with your org. You can keep your eyes open for opportunities such as courses, amazing podcasts like this one, learning opportunities, etc.
So I have tons of questions from all of that. One, I want to go back to organization, and I do want to say, in business, I try to be organized. Personally, I'm not quite as organized because unfortunately, I spend probably too much time on the business side of things. But when I do, and I start to get rid of things, it really does feel good. And it does feel like you're opening space in your life when even just getting rid of a few things. And it's interesting how that works psychologically.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're, like you said, you're making room for other things, other ideas.
Yeah, yeah. And I also wanted to ask about, so you mentioned theater a few times. Are you involved in the theater yourself, or is this something that's just a good example?
I am not involved. I just
Okay.
figured in sales, we have so many sports comparisons, and I know
Yeah.
there are plenty of very successful salespeople that want nothing to do with sports. So I try to think of another group activity.
Yeah, because I imagine like theater and improv particularly would be very helpful in an area where I think just leadership in general, improv is very beneficial because it really helps with communication, thinking on your feet, just getting your brain working in a different way, and just being kind of looking at I like the whole aspect of yes and for improv. And I know I'm kind of getting into a world since you said you're not involved with that, but it's not, looking at, because I think a lot of times, especially in business, you run into people who look at all the things that can't happen, like, oh, well, we can't do that because of this. We can't, oh, but what about this? And it's not like, okay, I see where we want to go. And this is like, these are some things we can do. Yes, I know there are some roadblocks or these things could get in the way, but this is how we could overcome them. So I think that whole mentality of the yes and like is just so beneficial. But I think too, from a sales perspective, I would imagine that's a very helpful thing to have in your communication skills bag.
It's such a great call out. I've done improv as sort of corporate team building before. It's
Mhm.
been really fun, but I really like your viewpoint of shifting the lens on leadership because I think just human nature is to initially say no, right? Is to,
Mhm.
the path of least resistance. We're just going to keep doing as we've always been doing. And so that's why sometimes when new ideas or challenging ideas are introduced, we want to say no innately. And so I like how you are thinking improv to kind of make it easier for us to be open to new ideas and new ways of doing things.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And then the other thing you talked about was LinkedIn. And I'd love to talk about how you use LinkedIn because a lot of people know, like they hear, oh, I need to be on LinkedIn. And sometimes they only think about it from a perspective of, oh, if I want to network and be open for job opportunities, like it's all about the job search. Do you have any, or maybe you could even talk about how you use LinkedIn that might help some of our listeners kind of think about how to use LinkedIn in a different way?
Yeah, that was a big mistake I made as well. When I first started selling, when LinkedIn was heating up a little bit, I sold to truck drivers. This was Samsara, and we sold trucking GPS systems. And so my buyers were not on LinkedIn. They hardly were ever on a computer. So I felt this very same way. But it wasn't until recently where LinkedIn now is very hot and borderline saturated in the sales world. You have a lot of really well established salespeople and sales leaders using LinkedIn as a shared think tank. So it's not just
Mhm.
about job hunting, it's a lot of shared collaboration. So, for example, you log in and you might see an AE at a company share, I just got off a call and this went really well. And they're sharing it with everybody in their network. They're sharing a win that they had with endless people, thousands of people. Someone else might share, I got off a call and it went terrible, and this is why, and this is how you should avoid it. So, again, you are now getting tips and tricks and recommendations outside of your little bubble. You're getting, the world wide web of ideas and experiences and things that you normally wouldn't have, right? So you have your little team and you're used to doing things a certain way, but you can connect with people at some of the most successful companies with some of the most successful people. And it's such a great tool to improve your own skills.
Mhm. How do you find the people that are the thought leaders? Is there a good way to do that, or how have you found those people that you trust and listen to?
So LinkedIn works similarly to the other social media platforms where I don't know if you even have to find them, they'll find you. You kind of log in and start liking things and commenting, and then their super secret algorithm will shove more of that in your face, and then you'll like that and connect with them. So you just kind of have to go in there and start somewhere. Just like if you're on a social media platform and you join a group about cooking, right? You're going to start seeing more recipes pop up on your feed. If you go in and LinkedIn and, if you have nothing going on in LinkedIn, which I'm sure isn't the case for your listeners, but even if you're starting from zero, you pick 5 companies to follow that you like, you're going to start seeing employees that work there. And then you're going to see people that interact with those employees, and it'll just kind of catch fire from there. So just start somewhere.
Thank you. Thank you for providing that. I know that's going to be helpful for so many people. And I do, I use it in many different ways, and I'm not looking for a job, but I do. I'm a big proponent of establishing a network and building your network, and not for any specific reason. I mean, not to sell people or not to get something from people, but you can learn, like you said, learn from them once they're in your network. Or you never know when somebody else might need something and you're like, oh, I actually know somebody that specializes in that or does that, or can help you or figure that out. And it's a good way to really connect people as well. And like you said, just learning your development. It's a great, cheap, inexpensive, not cheap, inexpensive way to build your knowledge base. Speaking of knowledge base, is there any great leadership advice that you've received throughout your career that really stands out for you?
Yes, in terms of leadership advice, I had a mentor who told me when you look for a role, there's so many things you can be looking for, right? A great mentor, a great product market fit. But this person believed, now keep in mind, we are salespeople, so we are motivated by money. But the simple advice was you should be learning or earning, ideally both, but more emphasis on the learning. And so, again, with job markets and so many opportunities floating by, and grass is always greener syndrome, and how do I evaluate this opportunity? What do I know what to look for? I have found it easiest to just concentrate on those two, learning and earning, ideally both, but emphasis more on the learning.
I love it. I love it. And going back to, and maybe this kind of circles back to what we started out with, is there something that you wish you would have known when you started out as leader that you didn't know, but you know now? Or maybe you don't know now and you'd still like to learn.
Yes, I wish that I understood that just like I wasn't trained to move from IC to manager, that my managers also weren't trained. And so I wish I had given them more grace. And I also wish that having known that, I would have invested more in myself and the skills needed to manage not only down, but manage up.
Mm-hmm. What would you recommend? Is there something that you've learned or that you've applied with as you've developed leaders on your team that you've done to help them not be in that same situation?
Yes. So it's so weird. Again, moving into management, most companies just pluck a top performer and say, okay, we're going to make you a manager. And it's often done last minute, or maybe there's some sort of hyper growth, etc. But I think there can be a much more thoughtful approach. Just like, I would even recommend this for a BDR moving into an AE role. You want to prepare for the role before you have it. And so if you're going to if you're going to promote anyone, it's your responsibility to prepare them. So for the sales leaders listening, if you're thinking about promoting someone, let them lead some team meetings or let them run one of your one-on-ones, right? Or maybe there's a new hire and it's on a different team. Have them do one-on-ones with that new hire so that they can practice these skills ahead of getting in the seat. And that way you can coach them ahead of them getting in the seat as well. That's first and foremost. Then there's a lot of resources out there today. So again, reaching out to LinkedIn or taking courses, reading books, getting yourself a coach. Don't try to just go in blindly, because you're not just dealing with customers anymore as a manager. Your customers are your direct reports, your people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important. And really, that's why we exist. Her Hype Squad and Boss Track and everything that we do, it exists for that very reason, like focusing on those new leaders who don't get that support from their companies. Because you're right, it seems to be vocalized a lot more, like this is a problem, that companies still don't invest in that, because they I don't think they understand that there's a value placed, and they know if they put somebody in that position, they'll just figure it out, or they think they're just going to figure it out, they'll just learn. But I don't think they think about all the inefficiency or the efficiencies that they would gain, and the value that that leader would be able to create right off the bat, and what they're kind of letting fall through the cracks by not providing that training, which is not it's not a huge investment. And not only is it good for their bottom line, but also good for employee relations and how that person feels moving into to their position and being prepared.
Yeah, you'd think there'd be more emphasis or thought put into some of these promotions, but sometimes at companies, everyone's just spread so thin. So,
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. I read the Women at Work, I think it's a McKinsey report that comes out every year about where we stand and where women stand in terms of leadership roles, and at what percentage we make up of each rung in the ladder, which is interesting in itself. But then it also talks about why women are opting out of management, and what are some of the reasons. And one of the biggest reasons is that they don't get the support. They don't feel like they have that support, which applies to men as well. But I don't know. I think sometimes men can have a different outlook on that.
sure, gosh, that's so unfortunate and so avoidable.
Yeah, yeah, it's so true. So true. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'd love to see things change, and hopefully they will going forward. But well, that's why we have resources and that's why we appreciate people like you coming on to talk and share your experiences, and how people can deal with certain situations, or what's the best way to address certain things. And so I really appreciate you providing that insight.
Happy to help. I wish I had something like her Hype Squad when I was going into management. Now that I'm in management, I'm a listener, and I'm always looking for podcasts and resources to be even better. So this is a vital podcast.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'd love to, and I know we're kind of leading into the conversation about mentorship. I'd love to hear about whether you've had a specific person in your life that has been a mentor in your career or life, that you would call out here.
Sure. That's a toughie, because I have been fortunate enough to have multiple amazing mentors. Shout out to Christian Borelli, shout out to Jordan Liu, shout out to Matt Marshall, Andy Wilson. But I think the one that really comes to mind is Chris Bear. We started out as colleagues at Samsara, and he is now a dear friend. But what stood out is that he came in as an outside hire, the only outside manager at that time. There were three set managers, and he came in and he led by example. I can't think of a better example of getting in the trenches with your reps than what Chris Bear did. And so what he did is he had a team of 7 or 8 reps. They were all smiling and dialing, ripping 80 dials a day. And he picked up the phones right away and was dialing with them. And he didn't stop selling alongside his team until he had, and I remember him still waving the signed purchase order in his hand. So he was dialing, booking meetings, holding discovery calls, moving clients through the pipeline, and then closing them, because he wanted to ensure that anything he told his team to do, that it was feasible, it was doable, and he was going to do it with them. And I'd never seen that before from a sales manager, especially an outside hire. They usually just come in and kind of lead from the ivory tower. So he taught me how to really get in the trenches with your people. And then from there, he had built immense trust with them. And so he was able to have very difficult conversations with many of them over the years, but they saw it as very supportive because of what he had done. I've also seen him stand up for people that maybe leadership wanted out the door, and he was willing to stick his neck out for a lot of his reps if you were mutually invested in the team. And so that I learned a lot from him. I'm still learning from him. He's a good friend of mine. We actually go out quarterly to bougie tasting menus to reward ourselves for our thankless positions as sales managers and directors. So it's fun to see that journey.
I love that. And so, yeah, sounds like such a great representative to learn from in leadership. I'd love to hear more about what a bougie tasting menu is. What is this?
So right now we both live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we are fortunate to have some of the best culinary experiences in the nation. Some of them have made the top 50 in the world list. And so we'll go to 2-star, 3-star Michelin restaurants where the tasting menus, there are those 9 courses where the food is about that big and you leave hungry after, but they've got edible gold flakes and things you've never even known were edible before. And so we spend about $300 to $500 per meal, but it's on a quarterly basis. And it's because management and leadership is a thankless job. So we go and we celebrate ourselves there.
I love it. I'm going to start calling them bougie tasting menus. Yeah, I know on the East Coast, Chef Jose Andres, he has a lot of restaurants that do that tasting menu. And you're right that they're so tiny. And you think, oh my gosh, how could I ever eat all this food? But you maybe could even eat more when you leave. It's
Absolutely. Yeah, it's more fun than anything. And
so
Jose
true.
Andres is one of my favorites. So maybe if you
Yeah.
and I are ever in the same city, we'll have to go to one of his.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah. I mean, if you're ever in the Miami area, we have a few places we could go and maybe
That's
something
right.
different than what you've seen out in San Francisco.
That's right. Yeah. Well,
And
you're
I know,
making me hungry now.
oh no, yeah, it is lunchtime. Well, I guess on your time, it's getting there. It's getting there. Uh, so I know we talked about this before, and you talked about organization and some things that you do, but are there any like actual routines or rituals that you do in the day, like in the morning, evening, middle of the day, that you really attribute your well-being to?
Yes. So in the morning, I like to get fresh air. I do 2 sorts of podcasts. I get yelled at first, but then I have some sort of gratitude or aspirational podcast to kind of even out the tone. So I think those 2 are important. And for a while, I was doing meal delivery kits for lunch, which was really helpful. And that way I could go outside and take another little walk, because I don't know if you're guilty of this, Michelle, but sometimes I start at 7:30, and unless something is telling me to leave, or if I have the means to leave the house, it quickly becomes 5 o'clock and I haven't gotten a breath of fresh air. So I think those would be my biggest slash most simple tips.
Yeah, that is so important, especially more people working from home. I think depending on where you worked, it was hard to go outside and do go for a walk because if you worked in a place where that, I mean, you didn't always do that, but you at least would go out for lunch, or a lot of people would say, I'm going over to the mall or going to the restaurant or going home, but at least it got you out of, driving home didn't necessarily keep you from sitting, but at least it gave you that different space and different scenery. And think helps a lot with your brain, and that environment change helps with creativity and like clearing your mind and giving you that break. I do. I don't always follow this, but I have a timer that every 50 minutes
Wow.
I have a timer that goes off, and I can ignore it or get up and do something. So I have weights that are by my desk, or I'll just kind of walk around the apartment or go out in the balcony. But I'm gonna just be honest that it is very easy to just ignore it. And so you really, like you said, you have to really be intentional with that.
Especially if you're doing deep work, I could see that
Yeah.
getting hard, but you took the first step, which is to make the alarm. So
Yeah.
you're ahead of most of us there.
And I love the yelling podcast. Do you have the names of the podcasts you listen to if somebody wants to get yelled at as well in the morning or
Yes, I'd have to look them up, but I think one is daily affirmations, or I think I just went to David Goggins' profile and kind of went down a rabbit hole from there. Anything military should do the trick if you're
okay.
into that.
And so the answer to my next question might just be like just being yelled at, but do you have a song that you'll put on to pump you up, like give you energy boost or a confidence boost and during the day when you're feeling a little down?
I do, yes. The yelling is just to get my morning going. When I need like
Okay.
a 2 p.m. boost, I go for my two favorite sales pump up songs. Number one is a rapper, 50 Cent, Piggy Bank.
Mm.
And he says, clickety clank, the money goes into my piggy bank. So
All
I like
right.
that one. And then my second go to is Sisters Are Doing It For Themselves by the Scissor Sisters.
Love it. Yes. So I'm just going to say that's the first time I've had that 50 Cent song come up. So I'm excited to have that on the list. And I love it. I hope
Amazing.
that inspires somebody to add that to their playlist.
Yeah, maybe Spotify is going to go crazy with all those downloads after this.
Exactly.
50 Cent, I want my royalties, or I want my
Oh.
referral bonus. If you're listening, 50
Yeah,
Cent.
make sure we tag him in any kind of social media here.
Yes.
Um, and is there something under or around $100 that you've bought in the last year or so that you would say has improved the quality of your day or life in any way?
Yes, I've started committing to monthly massages.
Mm.
So they're right around $100, and I just think they're a nice way to. I try to do them at the beginning of the week and at the beginning of a new month, so I like to do that. And then I also, I think starting 2 or 3 years ago, I started investing in a professionally done vision board, and
Mm.
I actually have it right here. You can pull it up. But you see, so the mantra this year is nothing changes if nothing changes. And you can see a lot of different things like how much you learn from theory, from doing, from mistakes, things
Mm.
like that. But I'm sure we've all done those magazine clip art vision boards,
Yeah.
and those might be really useful for people and helpful. But if these are my dreams and if these are things I want to work on day in and day out throughout the entire year, I made the decision to find a professional designer, tell them exactly what I want on it, and they beautify it and frame it for less than $100. And that's been been a big ROI for me.
Love that. That's such a great idea. And I've never seen anybody do that. I mean, obviously the vision board with the magazine cutouts and all that. What made you think to do that? Is it something that did you come across that or it just decided one day that's would be a good idea and you were going to invest in that?
I had seen more and more vision boards, but they were done digitally. And I think I tried it and I'm just not good at that. And I figured for less than $100, I can pay I already have a designer. She does custom art in my house, etc. And so I offered her, I know it's not really your wheelhouse, but maybe it's a slow season for you. Would you be willing to do a vision board? She thought it was so cool, so she jumped all over it. So I just figured in the 12 to 15 hours I could spend trying to figure out something like Canva or designer or painter platform, I could just pay someone.
Yeah, I love it. Do you have a picture of that somewhere that, or could you send a picture? I'd love to include that in the show notes for
Sure.
anybody kind of thinking about that.
Yes, and then I can give you the designer's name too,
Oh
Morgan
yeah.
Brunson, or I can send you her profile if any of your listeners would like one as well.
Yeah, definitely. That would be amazing. I love that. I love that idea. Thank you for sharing that and showing us.
Sure, thanks.
And so we talked a little bit also about podcasts, but are there any books that you have read that you think the audience or our listeners should definitely read? And it could be from a leadership standpoint, life standpoint, or even maybe fiction.
Yes, I'm going to try to give you another recommendation that maybe hasn't popped up on the show yet, but I recently read and really enjoyed Die with Zero.
Hmm.
So, again, in sales, we're very money hungry and we're always thinking, how can I earn more? How can I earn more? And at the end of the day, for what? For what are we working so hard? And yes, obviously people have to, put a roof over their head and food on the table, and salespeople, and I'm sure your listeners in general are very goal oriented, right? And sometimes it's hard to be in the now and spend that money in the now. And so Die with Zero really pointed out a lot for me of, if you die with even $10 in your bank account, you are doing it wrong. And it talks a lot about, for example, any of your parental listeners, which I'm not, I don't have a child, but talks about leaving an inheritance and the children saying, I'm so grateful for this inheritance, but like I could have used the money 10 years earlier if you had it. Like I really struggled those years. Why
Hmm.
didn't you give it to me earlier? So sorry, that's a long-winded answer to the book Die with Zero, because we work so hard for money. It really shifts your mindset of how do I enjoy this now?
Yeah.
Guilt-free.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And you're right, that hasn't come up. I'm curious, is there anything yet that you've done to change how you live that has resulted from the book?
Yes, I am trying to be more charitable with just anything that comes across my desk. So I have, regular charities that I like to support. And having I did a century ride, 100-mile bike ride a few years ago. And I was just overwhelmed with the love and support from my friends for that, not only financially, but how they showed up to cheer me on, etc., writing me lovely letters. And so when I see friends or even friends of friends sign up for an athletic event, I try to reciprocate that. And so I'm just trying to be more generous with what I donate. And also, I don't even have to know you to try to help you out. So that's one thing I'm working on. Again, I'm childless and spouseless, so that's how I'm finding making a difference right now.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I know we had a conversation when we initially met, and you had brought up this great idea of sending, and I can't remember, one of your employees needed to get away or needed to think about something, and maybe you can kind of tell this. I know we're kind of coming to the end.
Oh,
Actually,
yes.
we're like, here's a gift card. I'm gonna, go do this. And could you share that story?
Yes. So I had one rep. We kind of touched on this at the top of this podcast episode, but a lot of reps I found, or a lot of people in general, go from screen here to screen TV. And
Hmm.
he had shared that he was missing a lot of numbers. He just wasn't present in our meetings. And I asked him, like, what's going on? Like, are you okay? What's going on in your life? And he just said, I'm really not fulfilled right now because I'm just working so much and I don't do anything other than work. And I can see your calendar and I see you're going to field hockey and tennis and you go to dinner and you do this. And I just don't know how to get started with that. And it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I said, okay, well, first of all, you're going to shut down your computer You're going to grab a notebook and I'm going to send you some money to, I know you love this ice cream, so I'm just going to hit you a quick Venmo. You have to go get ice cream. I don't even want you to bring your phone. Just go get yourself a platter, an ice cream platter. I don't care what you do, but go treat yourself and just journal for a little bit. And that for him was just world changing because he was able to sit down. He came back with some really profound thoughts. And, from there, so much had happened. He decided he wanted to move, that he didn't want to be in tech sales, but he wasn't able to give himself the space to really think things through like that. So all he needed was a little nudge.
I love that gift that you gave him because it's not about the ice cream. It's about giving him that time and space to turn off his brain or think about something else and kind of take away all those distractions to be able to focus and realize. And I think a lot of times people won't do it for themselves because you just get busy in the day to day and so caught up. And so I love that. So thank you. I know I'm not sure it fit there, but giving in many different ways, I think is so important. And that's such a great story of leadership and looking after your people and seeing what they need and helping them get there.
Yeah, at the end of the day, we're all human beings more so than we are employees, right? And so people just want to feel heard and be seen and be cared for.
Yeah, so true. Well, Meredith, like I said, we've already reached the end of the hour. I can't believe it. It goes by so fast. But you are now officially part of our audience's Hype Squad. So I'm wondering if there's any last piece of advice or inspiration you'd like to leave everybody with.
The only piece of advice for the Hype Squad would be, and you probably all already know this, but you can do anything you put your mind to. If you want to be CEO, you can do that. If you want to be a VP, you can do it. If you want to be just the best damn sales rep that ever was, you can do that. If you want more life work balance, you can do that too. You're already here. You're taking the first step, investing in yourself, listening to this podcast, and you can do anything that you set your mind to.
Wow. Great words to end with, and appreciate you so much for being on here and providing such valuable advice, insights, and stories. So if people want to reach out to you and say hello, when can they? And if they can, where would be a good place for them to find you?
Absolutely. Please find me on LinkedIn, Meredith Chandler. I'm in an obnoxiously bright pink blazer, so you probably won't miss me. Or you can find me on merediththesalescoach.com if you're interested in coaching, interview prep, negotiation, or anything with your deals, management styles, etc. Happy to help, and I would love to connect with each and every one of you.
Perfect. And I love your profile photo because I like pink and I love bright colors. So it definitely stands out. I love it. So Meredith, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate your time. And I hope we eventually have a part two because I know we have a lot more we haven't explored.
That's right. Well, thank you, Michelle.
Yeah, well, have a good day and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye.